cryptocurrency. Then there's decentralized exchanges. So well, as far as the decentralized exchanges goes, there's this really interesting construction that has existed for about 1.5 years now called Uniswap. So what Uniswap is, it's a smart contract that holds balances of two tokens. We'll call them token A and token B. And it maintains an invariant that the balance of token A multiplied by the balance of token B has to equal the same value. And so the way that you trade against the thing is basically like you have this kind of curve, like X times Y equals K. And before you trade, it's at some points on the curve. After you trade, you just like pick some any other point on the curve. And then whatever the delta X is, that's the amount of A tokens you provide. Whatever the delta Y is, that's the amount of B tokens you get, or vice versa. And then kind of the slope at the current point on the curve kind of is the price. And so that just is the whole thing. And that just allows you to have this exchange for tokens, and even if there's very few participants, and the whole thing is just like so simple, and it's just very easy to set up, very easy to participate in, and it just provides so much value to people. So
and the fundamental the distributed application infrastructure allows that somehow.
Yes. So this is a smart contract, meaning this is all a computer program that's just running on Ethereum.
Smart contracts too are just fascinating.
They are.
Okay. Do you think cryptocurrency may become the main currency in the world one day? So where do you think we're headed in terms of the role of currency, the structure, type of currency in the world?
I definitely expect fiat currencies to continue to exist and continue to be strong, and I definitely expect kind of fiat currencies to also digitize in their own way over the next couple of decades.
What's fiat currency, by the way?
Just like things like US dollars and like dollars and euros and yen and these other things.
And they're sort of backed by governments.
Yes. But I also expect cryptocurrencies to play this kind of important role in just making sure that people always have an alternative if fiat currencies start breaking. So like if you're in some kind of very high inflation place like Venezuela, for example, or if your country just kind of gets cut off from other financial systems because of like something the banks do, like if there's even like some major trade disruption or something worse happens, then like cryptocurrencies are the sort of thing that just because of their kind of global neutrality, they're just kind of always there and you can keep using them.
It's interesting that you're quite humble about the possibilities of the future of cryptocurrency. You don't think there's a possible future where it becomes the main set of currency? Because it feels like fiat, it feels like the centralized control by governments of currencies limiting somehow. Maybe in my naive utopian view of the world.
It's definitely very possible. I think like for cryptocurrencies being the main form of value to kind of work well, like you do need to have some much more price stability than they have today. And I mean, there are now stable coins, and there are kind of cryptocurrencies that try to be more stable than existing things like Bitcoin and Ether. But that just is, to me, the kind of the main challenge.
Do you think? Do you think that's a characteristic of just being the early days? It's such a young concept. 10 years is nothing in the history of money.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of two things, right? One is it's still early days, but the other is a kind of more durable any kind of economic problem, which is that like demand for currency is volatile, right? Because of like recessions, booms, changes to technology, lots of things, and if people's demand for how much currency they want to hold changes. And if you have a currency that has a fixed supply, then the change in demand has to be entirely expressed as a change in value of the currency. And so what that means is that kind of the volatility of demand becomes entirely translated into volatility in kind of prices of things denominated in that currency. But if you have a currency where instead the supply can change, and so the supply can kind of go up when there's more demand. Then you have the supply kind of absorbing more of that volatility, and so the price of the currency would absorb less of the volatility.
On that topic, so Bitcoin does have a limited supply, a specific fixed supply.
Yes.
What's the idea? And Ethereum doesn't, but can you clarify? Just on the comment you just made, is Ethereum qualify to the kind of currency that you're talking about and being flexible in the supply?
And it's a bit more flexible, but kind of the thing that you would really want is something that's kind of specifically flexible in response to how valuable the currency is. And I'd recommend to look at stable coins as well. So like things like DAI, for example. It's like
How do you spell that?
DAI.
And what's stable coins? Is it a type of cryptocurrency?
It is a type of cryptocurrency. It's a type of cryptocurrency that's issued by a smart contract, one of these Ethereum computer programs, that where the smart contract holds a bunch of ether, and then it basically like that people deposit, and then it issues DAI, and the reason why people deposit is because they want to kind of go high leverage on their ether, and so it kind of pairs these two sets of users, one that wants stability and one that kind of wants extra risk, together with each other, and it basically creates or gives one set of participants a guarantee that they'll be that they have this asset that can be later converted back into ether, but like specifically at kind of the $1 rate.
And it has some kind of stabilizing network effects. When
it has this. Yeah, it has many kinds of stabilizing mechanisms in it.
That's fascinating. Okay, this world is awesome technically. Just from a scientific perspective, it's an awesome world that I often don't see from an outsider's perspective. What I often see is kind of maybe hype and a little bit, if I may say so, like charlatanism. And you don't often see, at least from my outsider's perspective, the beautiful science of it and the engineering of it. Maybe is there a comment you can make of who to follow, how to learn about this world without being interrupted by the charlatans and the hype people in this space?
I think you do need to just know the specific kind of just people to follow. Like there's all the kind of the cryptographers and the researchers, and there's just like even just the Ethereum research crew, like myself, like Dankrad, Danny, Justin, and of the other people, and then of the academic cryptographers, and I came like before this today, I was at Stanford, and Stanford has the Center for Blockchain Research, and of Dan Bonnet, that's kind of really famous and great cryptographer, was running it, and there's a lot of other people there, and there's people working on like zero knowledge proofs, for example, and Zuko from Zcash is kind of one other person that I kind of respect. So I think if you follow the technical,
just crawl along that.
You just
start with the Ethereum group, and then look at the academics, Dave Bonnet, and so on, and then just cautiously expand the network of people you follow. Yeah,
exactly. And like if someone seems too self-promotional, then just remove them.
Is there books that are? So there's these white papers, and we just discussed about ideas being condensed into really small parts. Is there books that are emerging that are kind of good introductory material for crypto?
For historical ones, and there's like Nathaniel Popper's Digital Gold, which is just about the history of Bitcoin. There's like one, and then Matthew Lysing announced that there's one about the history of Ethereum. For technical ones, and there's Andreas Antonopoulos' Mastering Ethereum.
Great. So let me ask you sort of, sorry, to pull back to the idea of governments and decentralized currency. There's a tension between decentralization of currency and the power of nations, the power of governments. What's your sense about that tension? Is there some rule for regulation of currency? Is there is government the enemy of digital currency, of distributed currency, or can they be like cautious friends?
I mean, I think like the one thing that people forget is that it's clearly not entirely an enemy, because I think if there hadn't been so much government regulation on kind of centralized issuing centralized digital currencies, then we'd be seeing things, people like Google and Facebook and Twitter just kind of issuing them left and right. And then, like, if that was the case, then decentralized currencies would still appeal to some people, but they definitely would appeal to less people than today. So even in that sense, I think it's clearly been kind of more of a just kind of set the stage for the kind of the existence as of the sector in some ways, but also, and I think some of both. Like, there's definitely things that governments kind of can do, in some cases have done, to hurt the spread of and of growth of blockchains. There's things that they've done to help, and they've in some cases definitely done a good job of kind of going after fraudulent projects, and of going after some of the projects that have some of the kind of craziest and most misleading marketing. There's also the possibility that governments will end up using blockchains for a lot of different things. Like, governments, yeah, I mean, they do a lot more than just regulating, right? Like, there's also, like, they have the kind of identity records, and they have kind of like property registries, even just their own currency is like secure, like lots of different kind of things that they're operating, and there's even blockchain applications in a lot of those.
Yeah, and they can leverage technology to do a lot of good for our societies. It is a little unfortunate that governments often lag behind in terms of their acceptance and leverage of technology. If you look at the autonomous vehicle space, AI in general, they're a few years behind, and it'd be nice to help them catch up. That's a always ongoing problem. You met Vladimir Putin to discuss decentralized currency. You're born in where were you born?
Kolomna. It's a city about 115 kilometers south of Moscow.
In Russia.
Yes.
Yeah, I grew up in Moscow. I mean, that's Vladimir Putin is a central figure in this part of the world. So what was that like meeting him? What was that experience like?
He's taller in photos than in person.
Yeah, he's yeah, that's right. He's 5'7", I think, 5'8", maybe.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately we didn't actually kind of have too much of a chance to talk to him. Like, I managed to see him for about 1 minute at the end of this meeting, and I did get a chance to see a lot, like some of the other kind of government ministers, and like he recommended some, and some of them are actually kind of interested in trying to use like blockchains to like for various government use cases to kind of limit corruption and other things. And I have like, it's hard to tell from an enemy, because I think if there hadn't been so much government regulation on kind of centralized issuing centralized digital currencies, then we'd be seeing things, people like Google and Facebook and Twitter just kind of issuing them left and right. And then, like, if that was the case, then decentralized currencies would still appeal to some people, but they definitely would appeal to less people than today. So even in that sense, I think it's clearly been kind of more of a just kind of set the stage for the kind of the existence as of the sector in some ways, but also, and I think some of both. Like, there's definitely things that governments kind of can do, in some cases have done, to hurt the spread of and of growth of blockchains. There's things that they've done to help, and they've in some cases definitely done a good job of kind of going after fraudulent projects, and of going after some of the projects that have some of the kind of craziest and most misleading marketing. There's also the possibility that governments will end up using blockchains for a lot of different things. Like, governments, yeah, I mean, they do a lot more than just regulating, right? Like, there's also, like, they have the kind of identity records. And they have kind of like property registries, even just their own currency is like secure, like lots of different kind of things that they're operating. And there's even blockchain applications in a lot of those.
Yeah, and they can, they can leverage technology to do a lot of good for our society.
Hmm.
It is a little unfortunate that governments often lag behind
Hmm.
in terms of their acceptance and leverage of technology. If you look at the autonomous vehicle space, AI in general, they're a few years behind,
Hmm.
and it'd be nice to help them catch up. That's a always ongoing problem. You met Vladimir Putin
Hmm.
to discuss decentralized currency. You're born in the where were you born?
Kolomna. It's a city about 115 kilometers south of Moscow.
In Russia.
Yes.
Yeah, I grew up in Moscow. I mean, that's Vladimir Putin
Mm.
is a central figure in this part of the world. So, what was that like
Uh,
meeting him? What was that experience like?
he's taller in photos than in person. Um,
Yeah, he's
mm,
yeah, that's right. He's 5'7", I think, five
mhm.
eight maybe.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately we didn't actually kind of have too much of a chance to talk to him. Like I managed to see him for about 1 minute at the end of this meeting, and I did get a chance to see a lot, like some of the other kind of government ministers, and like he recommended some, and some of them are actually kind of interested in trying to use some like blockchains to like for various government use cases to kind of limit corruption and other things. And I have like it's hard to tell from one conversation kind of what things are genuine and what things are just like, oh, blockchain is cool, let's do blockchain.
Right.
Mm.
But when I listen to like Barack Obama talk about artificial intelligence,
Mm.
there's certain things I hear where
Mm.
okay, so he might not be an expert in AI, but he like actually studied it carefully enough to think about it. Like he
Mhm.
internal like even if it's just reading a Wikipedia page,
Huh.
like he really thought about what this technology means. Did you get a sense that Putin or some of the ministers like thought about blockchain, like thought about the fundamentals of technology, or like understand it intuitively, or are they too old school to try to grasp it?
Some are old school, some are more new school. It depends. It's definitely like depends on who you talk to.
I mean, that's an open question for me with Putin because Putin has said
Yeah. I don't
some
know. And
stuff
as I
about
said, I've
AI,
only talked to him for about 1 minute, so
but sometimes you can pick up sort of
uh,
insights. As a quick comment, there are about, maybe you can correct me on this, but there are about 3,000 cryptocurrencies being actively traded.
yes.
And Ethereum is one of, a lot of people believe that Ethereum will be the main cryptocurrency. I think Bitcoin is currently still the main cryptocurrency,
Hmm.
but Ethereum very likely might become the main one. Is this kind of diversity good in the crypto world? Do you see it sticking
Hmm.
around? Should there be a winner? Like, should there be some consensus globally around Bitcoin or around Ethereum? Like, what's your sense?
I definitely think the diversity is good, and I definitely think also that there's probably too many people trying to make separate blockchains kind of right now.
Yeah,
The number should definitely be greater than one, and probably greater than two or even five.
but not three
But
thousand.
not 3,000, yeah, and also not even like 40 high quality platforms that try to do the same thing. Yeah, there's definitely this range from just like one person who just like wrongly thinks that you can create a cryptocurrency in like 12 hours and like doesn't even think about kind of the community aspects of maintaining it, going to people actually trying but only creating a really tiny one, to like scammers, to people like making something that's actually successful. And then there's a lot of different categories of blockchain and kind of project in terms of what it's trying to do and what applications it's for. And I think the experimentation is definitely healthy.
If you look at the two worlds, there might be a little bit disjoints, but the distributed applications, cryptocurrency, and then the world of artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
Do you see there's some overlap between these worlds that both worry about centralized control? Is there some
Mm.
overlap that's interesting that you think about? Do you think about AI much?
Yeah, and I think Definitely kind of thought about things like like the AI kind of control problems and alignment problems and all of those
Do
things.
you worry about the existential threat of AI?
It's definitely one of the things I worry about. I think block there's a lot of kind of common challenges because in both cases what you're ultimately trying to do is you're trying to kind of get a simple system to direct a more complex system. Like in the case of these strong AIs, the idea would be that the simple system is people and the complex system is, well, whatever thing the people end up kind of unleashing on the universe that'll hopefully be a great thing. And in the case of blockchains, kind of the complex, well, the simple thing is the algorithm, which is a piece of static and fully open source code, and the more complex thing is just all of the different possible kind of human actors and of the strategies that they might end up used to participate in the network. And,
Do you think about your own mortality? Like what you hope to
um,
accomplish in your life in the
oh,
context?
I definitely think about ending my own mortality.
So that's if I gave you the option to live forever, would you?
Depends a lot on what the fine print is. But I mean, if it's one of those things where I'm going to be kind of like floating through empty space for 10 to the 75 years, then no. If it's forever worth of kind of having, a fulfilling life with kind of meaning like with friends to spend the time with kind of meaningful challenges to explore and kind of interesting things to be working on, then I think absolutely. Mm.
That's beautifully put. Live forever, but you'd have to check the fine print.
Mm.
I think there's no better way to end it. Vitalik, thank you so much for talking to us. So exciting to follow your work
Well,
from a
thank you.
distance. And thank you for creating a revolutionary idea and sticking with it and building it out and doing some incredible engineering work. And thanks for talking today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Vitalik Buterin. And thank you to our sponsors, ExpressVPN and Masterclass. Please consider supporting the podcast by signing up to Masterclass at masterclass.com/Lex and getting ExpressVPN at expressvpn.com/LexPod. If you enjoy this podcast, subscribe on YouTube, review it with 5 stars on Apple Podcast, support it on Patreon, or simply connect with me on Twitter at Lex Friedman. And now, let me leave you with some words from Vitalik Buterin. The thing that I often ask startups on top of Ethereum is, can you please tell me why using Ethereum blockchain is better than using Excel? And if they can come up with a good answer, that's when you know you got something really interesting. Thank you for listening and hope to see you next time. The following is a conversation with Sylvia McCauley, a computer scientist at MIT, winner of the Turing Award, and one of the leading minds in the fields of cryptography, information security, game theory, and most recently, cryptocurrency and the theoretical foundations of a fully decentralized, secure, and scalable blockchain at Algorand, a company of cryptographers, engineers, and mathematicians that he founded in 2017. Quick mention of our sponsors: Athletic Greens Nutrition Drink, the Information In-Depth Tech Journalism website, Four Sigmatic Mushroom Coffee, and BetterHelp Online Therapy. Click the sponsor links to get a discount and to support this podcast. As a side note, let me say that I will be having many conversations this year on the topic of cryptocurrency. I'm reading and thinking a lot on this topic. I just recently finished reading The Bitcoin Standard, a book I highly recommend. As always, with this podcast, I'm approaching it with an open mind, with compassion, with as little ego as possible, and yes, with love. I hope you go along with me on this journey and don't judge me too harshly on any likely missteps. As usual, I will play devil's advocate.